Welcome to part 2 of cycle 3, developing a performance assessment. We're in this second part of the third cycle, and in this particular video we're going to look at some examples of performance assessment, see what they have in common, identifying elements that we need in order to create our own, and have some honest discussions about how we can make these performance assessments part of our daily instruction. So let's get started. Performance assessments. Well, if I didn't make the case yet in the first video, let me provide you with another question. What's the real purpose of these performance assessments? Isn't it really the answer to this question? How have my students improved their communicative skills via the interpretive, presentational, and interpersonal modes? And if you really think about it, it's both you and the students who want to and need to, or should want to and should need to find out the answer to those questions. Because that is the big difference between a traditional test and a performance assessment. In the past, we would use tests, or now we call them assessments, to find out what students don't know. In a performance assessment world, what we're trying to do is really assessing to find out what students can do. And you may have heard me talk about this before, but what is really the purpose of assessment in a world language classroom? Well, there are really only two things: performance and feedback. Students, and you the teacher, want students to perform, to find out what students can do with the language, and then of course they need the feedback, either from you, from themselves, or a peer. So performance assessments really are the one and only way to go about when we're talking about assessment in a world language classroom. We want to take a look at a couple of examples of performance assessments. I'm going to read them to you. We're going to highlight a couple of features, and I have our second video task for this process. So here's your video task number 2. As I'm showing you this example, what I would like you to do is pay attention to what you noticed about each of these examples. What do they all have in common? What are some of the common elements? And then also think about, could your students complete these assessments? If yes, why? If no, why not? So again, I'm going to show you a couple of examples of performance assessments in both the interpersonal and in the presentational speaking mode. And then have you guys kind of, as I'm going through them, think about what's the structure and why do you think it is that way? And then we'll go over our answers in a couple of minutes. Okay, so let's take a look. Here's a first example of a performance assessment. It seems to be a beginning French class, so I believe this is a level 1, a first year course. It says right there, Unit 8, Assessment Interpersonal Speaking. Seems to be they have a couple of learning targets up on top. I can ask and give information about sizes, quantities, colors, prizes, opinions. Okay, there's a proficiency goal. If I interpret this graph or this arrow correctly, I would think that novice high is the proficiency goal. And then let's take a look at what's below there in the scenario 2. And in case you're a little further away from the video, I will read it out loud. You're going into your favorite store to find your junior ring ceremony outfit. And you can't get that dorky song your French teacher made you learn out of your head. And you keep humming it as you shop. Unfortunately, the clerk recognizes the song and decides you must speak French and decides to help you only in French. You think maybe if you talk to the clerk in French, you'll get a discount as they have a handful of 50% off coupons in their hand. When the clerk asks what they can help you with, tell the clerk that you want to buy something special. Let the clerk know what colors and sizes you like. Later, the sales clerk will ask how the clothes fit, if you like them, if you like to buy them. Don't forget you need footwear. If you decide to buy, tell the clerk how you will be paying. Since you begin to become pretty confident with your French speaking skill, don't forget to ask about that 50% off coupon. Okay, here's a second example. Looks to be again a interpersonal speaking example for a Spanish class and developing Spanish. So that'll be a second year Spanish course. Once again, we have some learning targets at the top, an intermediate low proficiency goal, and this is the scenario. You're completing a nursing internship at the University of Louisville. A female patient comes in that only speaks Spanish. The bilingual nurse is off that day, so they ask you to help translate and fill out some basic paperwork. You gladly accept. Greet the patient, make her feel comfortable, ask the patient some basic personal questions, ask what happened to the patient, what hurts them. Take notes on the form below based on the information the patient gives you. If you can think of a recommendation based on the symptoms given, feel free to do so to make the patient feel a bit more at ease. Now we're switching into the presentational speaking mode. Learning targets, proficiency goal, scenario. You've been asked to participate in a special event at the Americana Community Center to encourage good nutrition and healthy eating habits for immigrants new to the United States. Your job is to create a fun, informative presentation to teach children about healthy meals. You'll want to be sure to include, there seems to be a list there. And then, since you'll be presenting this to a community audience, you may also want to create a written presentation that is visually appealing and supports the points you're making in your spoken presentation. Now we're going a little bit further into a third year interpersonal speaking scenario, but looks like it's also targeting an immediate low as well. Quite a bit of learning targets. The scenario is the following. You just saw your boyfriend, girlfriend in the hallway talking to someone else, and you decide to confront him or her in the lunchroom, since you both have the same lunch. He or she is in the same Spanish class with you, so you decide to have the conversation in Spanish, so that all the other students in the cafeteria won't be able to hear what is going on and mind their own business. During your talk, you plan to tell him or her what you saw, complain about what you saw, tell him how you feel, ask for an explanation. Your boyfriend or girlfriend gives you an explanation that makes you believe he or she wasn't lying, and you feel really bad about it, so you decide to apologize for jumping to conclusions. Another third year, this time a presentational speaking one, also targeting immediate low. Your French teacher is so passionate about learning French that she would like more students at your school to learn French, and has convinced the principal that there should be a French language report for the school newscast. He or she has given each of you a topic for the video report, and yours is high school relationships. Your video should include what makes someone a good friend, what makes someone a bad friend, what is the ideal relationship. You may decide to include relationships, people you know in school, to show good friends and ideal relationships. So those are just some of the examples, and I hope you noticed some of the common features that they all have. Here are the ones that I hope you noticed, or that I was hoping you would catch. They all have learning targets that appear to be directly from the unit. My guess is that this is not the first time that the students have seen those targets. In fact, they've probably been doing everything for the past 6, 7, or however many weeks the unit lasts to get ready for this particular performance assessment. So there's a clear alignment again between the targets and the assessment. Shouldn't be a surprise what's on the assessment. We all had a proficiency target each of the assessments, so it's reminding the learners again what kind of language we're hoping to produce. Because while those scenarios may look interesting, we always have to remind students what their target is proficiency-wise, because, just taking this example right here, you could probably respond to that scenario at the novice level, at the intermediate level, or at the advanced level. The example I like to give is family. We can have a description of a family and share some of the feature of family, but I can describe my family at the novice level. My mom's name is, she works as she's blah, 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 old, she lives in. I can give it to you in the intermediate level and kind of talk about all the great things we do and why we do them and some of our routines and some of our traditions. Or I can really tell you about my family and how it's a perfect example of how in my culture the family structures is different than the American culture. And so do you see, the topic doesn't necessarily determine the proficiency level, but how well students are using a language. So that proficiency target is really important for the students. Also, sometimes it just helps to have a little reminder if we're targeting intermediate low, that we're also getting intermediate low. I hope you noticed these are all real life like scenarios. We know they're not real life because they're taking place within a school setting, but Gregory Fulkerson taught me that term real life like. So they could happen in the real world. And I hope you also noticed that all of these scenarios could help in this case, in the hometown of this particular group of students, which is Louisville, Kentucky. And so that's the hard part. We don't want to have all of our scenarios to be, imagine you're studying in Barcelona. Imagine you're an exchange student in Madrid. But we want to find scenarios that could happen in Delaware. The reason that students are learning languages is not just that they can all study abroad, but so that they can use languages right there at home. It's a little harder, but it will pay off in the long run as students see the value of these assessments. And I also hope you caught that every one of those tasks is an open-ended task, allowing the students to push further, to go above and beyond what's minimal requirement. That's because when we're asking our students, even those high flyers, if you ask them for 10 things, you're going to get 10 things and not 12 or 15. Again, that's the difference between a performance assessment and a more achievement-oriented assessment. We want to push the kids as high as possible to find out how far can they go on that proficiency continuum. So hence, all the tasks really were open-ended. None of them had anything, use 3 verbs, 5 sentences. However many sentences you can use to complete the task is however many sentences that you will use. So that famous question, how long should that take? Or how many words should never be uttered again in your classroom? Okay, so these were some of the examples of performance assessments, and I hope you were able to get that structure of how to write one yourself. So we would start with learning targets, have an authentic scenario, and then leaning to a meaningful task. And you really need all 3. I have seen in some other performance assessment banks that they have only, one of the 2, or either a authentic scenario or a meaningful task, or sometimes we have the task and the scenario, but we're not really sure what the learning targets were. And so it's really important that we align those 3 things, that we go from the learning targets into an authentic scenario and a meaningful task. And when we have those targets, we got to keep in mind they have to be based on the actual unit that the students are going through right now. So we can't surprise them with something now just to see, well, maybe I can push the kids a little just to see. It's not the purpose of performance assessment. And they have got to be aligned with the proficiency target. While yes, you can talk about family in the 3 different, in different levels of proficiency, you do want to keep in mind though, when you're asking students, you want to ask students to where you think there should be. So if I'm asking you to produce a list, I'm only going to produce a list, which means I can only possibly get novice level of speech. If I'm asking them to narrate in the simple past, then I'm likely going to get more closer to the advanced level of speech. The authentic scenario should provide for the context for using a target language. And again, it's really important to consider a context where you really would have to use the target language, not just speak in Spanish, because the scenario says speak in Spanish. A couple of years ago, we worked with a couple of teachers, I believe it was in Delaware, and it was a really courageous, brave group of teachers who wrote fantastic performance scenarios, or scenarios for performance assessments, and there's a great bank of them. But one of them really caught our eye. We loved it. So let me share it with you. It was something, I'm trying to remember, something along the lines of, you've just gotten your schedule and you're trying to trying to change your schedule. So you go down to the guidance office, but they're all out of schedule forms except for Spanish ones. you fill out the form and then talk to your counselor in Spanish. It was really interesting. It was very engaging. It was appropriate for the unit based on learning targets, aligned with the proficiency target. But what's wrong with that scenario? Exactly. Why are you talking to your guidance counselor in Spanish? So finding a context that would actually require you to use the target language is key to make these scenarios as real-life-like as possible. This should also be interesting and clear and logical written for the student. The task, again, should be clear and logical, which sometimes is easier said than done. Teachers, let's be honest, we can make these things very, very complicated and have steps 3, step 4, step 5, but think about clear, logical language. And again, that task should be open-ended to allow those students to go above and beyond the minimal expectations. So that's kind of a structure for a performance assessment, going from the learning targets of a unit all the way to the meaningful task. But my favorite slide, because if you paid attention, I did say something in the first video of this cycle that talked about performance assessment in a different way. So we kind of looked at the structure, and this is pretty formal, and I could see those performance assessments that we just looked at as kind of the end of unit, end of semester, end of course performance assessment. So very much a summative checking for learning. But I mentioned to you that you could do performance assessments every single day. So how do you do that? Well, that is going to become your video task number 3. So time for a little discussion again. And here are our instructions. If our goal is for students to be successful on these more summative performance assessments, what structure could or should our daily formative assessments have? So now that we've looked at some summative assessments and know what they look like, what does that mean for our daily assessments? That'll be your video task number 3. And once you've completed that, you can move on to video 3, and I'll be back with you then.